Today's video is about our inner critic and how our inner critic affects our parenting and therefore our children. Hi everyone, I'm Mandy J. Welcome to my channel. I'm a certified completion process practitioner and a conscious parent. And today I want to talk a little bit about our inner critic and how our inner critic affects us, our parenting, and our children. So our inner critic is that voice inside our head that keeps us in line, keeps us in check. It's the voice that disciplines us throughout the day when we make mistakes. And it says things like, "There's no time to be sad," or "What's wrong with you?" or "Get it together." This inner voice is a combination of our primary caregivers, aka our parents or other caregivers that we spent a lot of time with when we were younger, between the ages of birth and age 8. One myth is that we have one inner critic, but the truth is we actually have multiple inner critics, and they're always interacting with each other and interacting with the other parts of ourselves that are not critical. So you might have an inner critic that's extra mean when you really need a talking to, or you might have one that's particularly good at guilting you. The point is that we use multiple tactics through these inner critics to keep ourselves in line, to keep ourselves in check, and to keep ourselves being good. However we keep ourselves in line, in check, or being good is exactly how we are going to keep our children in line, in check, and being good until we become conscious of it and decide to do otherwise. So if you primarily use shame to motivate yourself to do better in life, then that is how you are going to motivate your child. By verbally punishing our children through criticism, we are actually teaching them to verbally punish themselves. Because how we treat ourselves becomes how we treat our children, becomes how they treat themselves, and the cycle continues. This is one of the ways that our subconscious mind is programmed during childhood. Shame is primarily how we verbally punish or criticize children. And this is important to note for very young children. When they are being shamed for a behavior, and this can be as simple as "Stop that" with a stern look on your face, they cannot reason or decipher between the fact that their behavior is being shamed and that they're not. The child will always decide that they are bad. They don't have the mental capacity to understand that the behavior is bad and that they are not. This is how self-shame starts and the seeds of unworthiness are planted. And I want to be honest about shame for a second. If our goal of parenting is to control behavior, shame works. People will do almost anything to avoid shame because shame means disconnection, and as humans, we need connection for survival, especially when we're young children. We absolutely must stay connected with our caregivers to be clothed, fed, and taken care of. And if we're taking this a step deeper, self-shame is disconnecting from or rejecting ourselves. So when we perceive that something we're doing is bad, we reject ourselves, and we think that by modifying the behavior, we can avoid the shame and we won't have to push ourselves away anymore. And while this is true, it only works for a short time because it's actually the self-rejection that we're rebelling against in the first place. So we're bound to act out again against the self-rejection, pushing ourselves away, and then we don't consciously know that that's what we're doing, and then we do the behavior, then we reject ourselves again, and so the cycle continues. Those of us in the healing business know that we cannot shame or criticize ourselves into being happy. It simply doesn't work this way. It is the inner critic that is creating the internal war and the turmoil in the first place and creating unhappiness. Let me show you my shirt. Happiness is an inside job. Essentially, when we have an asshole living inside of us telling us that we're a piece of shit all day, it's pretty hard to live a happy existence. Until somebody decides to heal and break the cycle of toxic thought patterns, we will continue to subconsciously pass these down from generation to generation. I also want to take a moment to talk about condemning the inner critic, because a lot of people in the self-help community talk about getting rid of the inner critic, right? It makes sense. Logically, we're like, okay, we want to banish the inner critic from our mind so that we can be happy. But actually, what we're doing is we're still rejecting a part of ourselves. The inner critic is still us. So by condemning the inner critic and trying to get rid of the inner critic, we're just creating a new critic that's going to discipline, regulate, and keep in line the old critic. So the goal is actually to bring the inner critic closer, to get to know the inner critic, and to love the inner critic and find out what its needs are. And I help people do this through facilitating parts work. I'll have my client take on the consciousness of the critic itself, and then I will talk to that part of the person and ask questions. And through this process, we bring the subconscious to the conscious, and through this new awareness, the person is able to make new conscious decisions based on new awareness about what's going on inside of them. When we get all these parts inside of us to know each other, love each other, meet each other's needs, we're actually bringing them together to become one again, and this is called integration. I also help people heal or integrate through the completion process. And what this does is it creates resolution for our inner child within the memories that caused these thought patterns in the first place. To learn more about the completion process, please watch my video called What is the Completion Process and How It Can Change Your Life. I've been on my own healing journey for about 10 years now. So for the most part now, I don't verbally punish myself anymore. When I make a mistake, I love myself through it. I get super curious about what it was all about, why I did it, the subconscious reasons behind it, so that I can heal and become a more integrated whole person. And the same goes for our children. If a young child is acting out, they don't consciously know why, and so it actually does them a disservice to ask them why. Most commonly, our children are acting out in response to the disconnection that they're being met with. Most parents first start this disconnection process when their child first starts exhibiting emotions. Most parents meet their child's emotions with disapproval and disconnection. I encourage you to watch my videos on mirroring and validation and empathy and attunement to learn more about how to care for your child's emotions. We're human beings, and so we are an emotional species. And so it's crucial for us to learn how to use our emotional body to our advantage and how to foster cooperation with our emotions instead of rejecting them and disapproving of them. I also want to talk a little bit about, there's a group of parents out there that I know are working so hard to break these patterns, but they're trying to do it. They're trying to treat their own child differently without healing their own inner critic. I want to speak to this a little bit because this is a huge step in our self-awareness and cycle breaking, but it's also very difficult, and here's the reason why. When we're trying to implement these types of parenting, let's say gentle parenting, respectful parenting, and we're doing it without healing our own wounds, then what can happen is when we make mistakes as a parent, the inner critic comes online and ends up criticizing us when we don't parent right and we're not doing a good job. Unless we heal this shame within us, it will still affect our children, if not directly, then indirectly. Thank you for watching, everyone. I thank you for doing your best to raise emotionally healthy and happy humans. This parenting journey is not easy, so just remember to be gentle with yourself. Namaste.